Welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. As we start another week, we're glad you're with us. Well, President Trump is taking on the news media once again, and he's not the only one. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina is saying that some of the coverage of the president has been, quote, almost to the point of hysterical.
The president is also ramping up his search for a new national security advisor. He met with candidates for the job this weekend in Florida. Caitlin Burke has the story.
President Trump returns to Washington today after spending the weekend at his private club in Florida. However, his time away had little to do with escaping work. The commander-in-chief spent his time in the Sunshine State rallying supporters, interviewing contenders for national security advisor, and in meetings about replacing Obamacare.
We are going to be submitting in a couple of weeks a great health care plan that's going to take the place of the disaster known as Obamacare. It will be repealed and replaced.
Both the president and the first lady came under fire after their rally Saturday. Some on the left criticizing Melania for beginning the rally with the Lord's Prayer.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven.
And Trump after referring to an incident in Sweden.
You look at what's happening in Germany. You look at what's happening last night in Sweden. Sweden. Who would believe this?
In response, the former Swedish prime minister tweeted, "Sweden? Terror attacks? What has he been smoking? Questions abound." Trump explained his comment in a tweet of his own, writing, "My statement as to what's happening in Sweden was in reference to a story that was broadcast on Fox News concerning immigrants and Sweden." That story on Fox News that Trump referred to was from Tucker Carlson tonight. Carlson spoke with a documentary filmmaker about a surge in violent crimes in Sweden. Some have traced that back to an increase of refugees. During the rally, Trump also took a moment to criticize the mainstream media.
Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson, and Abraham Lincoln, and many of our greatest presidents fought with the media and called them out, oftentimes on their lies. When the media lies to people, I will never, ever let them get away with it. I will do whatever I can that they don't get away with it. They have their own agenda, and their agenda is not your agenda.
And he took on the media in a tweet that got a lot of attention as well, saying the fake news media isn't his enemy, but the enemy of the American people. Those comments, of course, setting off a firestorm.
If you want to preserve, I'm very serious now, if you want to preserve democracy as we know it, you have to have a free and many times adversarial press. And without it, I'm afraid that we would lose so much of our individual liberties over time. That's how dictators get started.
But South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, a longtime friend of McCain, says the media has indeed gone too far in its coverage of the president.
The bottom line here is America is not becoming a dictatorship. Senator McCain was right to say that we need, as politicians, understand the role of the press and jealously guard it. But I would say this to the American press corps. When it comes to Trump, you're over the top. You're acting more like an opposition party. Every president's had problems with the press. You need to do your job. But from a Republican point of view, I think the coverage against President Trump has been almost to the point of being hysterical. And y'all need to do some self-evaluation, in my view.
Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
You know, they said in that press conference, well, you're hurting the First Amendment. And I wonder how many people in the press actually know what the First Amendment says. Would you mind if I quoted a little part of it? What does the First Amendment say? It goes like this: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That's the First Amendment. Then it goes on to talk about free speech and free press and so forth. And the part about press is like two words, and press. And the main portion of the First Amendment deals with religious freedom and the fact that the Congress shall pass no law setting up an established church. That's what it says. And so all that business about, well, if you go against the Washington Post or the New York Times, you're violating the, quote, First Amendment. How about all the violation that's had to do with religious freedom over the last few years? Unbelievable assault on religion. You don't hear the so-called free press bemoaning the fact that we've lost that part of the First Amendment. That's what it says. Congress shall pass no law. Not state legislatures and certainly not the president. Congress shall pass no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And you get almost no cases on the free exercise. So it's mostly been the establishment of religion. And so little kids have not been able to pray over their milk and cookies in kindergarten because of, quote, the First Amendment. Well, it's been distorted by the courts. And I think the media, you asked those reporters to quote it, and they couldn't report it if their lives depend on it. Well, despite all the negative media coverage about the president, Americans are very positive about the outlook for the economy. John Jessup has that.
Pat, a clear majority of Americans believe the economy is doing well, and they expect the trend to continue under President Trump. 61% believe the economy is strong, compared to 39% who say it's weak. Those are the findings of a Harvard-Harris poll published by the Hill newspaper. Mark Penn, the poll's co-director, says it's really a surprising turnaround given how negative voters have been about the economy since 2009. The stock market shot up the day after Trump's victory and has been climbing steadily ever since. Well, former Secretary of State John Kerry reportedly tried to broker a regional Mideast peace plan a year ago. The report follows last week's meeting between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump, which included talk of the possibility of a peace deal that would go beyond just the Israelis and Palestinians and bring in other countries as well. But one key Israeli leader tells CBN News he doesn't think the Palestinians will ever accept the existence of Israel. Chris Mitchell brings us the story from Jerusalem.
In early 2016, a secret meeting between Kerry, Jordan's King Abdullah, Egypt's President el-Sisi, and Netanyahu took place in Aqaba, Jordan. The purpose of the meeting was a regional peace plan based in part on the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative. Kerry's upgraded initiative would make Jerusalem the capital of two states and called on Israel to turn over the entire West Bank to the Palestinians in exchange for recognition of Israel as a Jewish state. However, Ambassador Michael Oren, Israel's Deputy Minister of Public Diplomacy, told CBN News he doesn't believe the Palestinians would ever recognize Israel as a Jewish state.
Because the Palestinians will never accept the existence of a legitimate Jewish state in any borders. It's not about borders. It's about the existence of a Jewish state.
According to the report, Netanyahu rejected the offer because he did not believe his government would accept it. Last week, during their press conference, both Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump implied a regional peace plan might offer the best opportunity for resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict without offering details. Oren said the Palestinians don't have a state because they rejected previous offers for one reason.
The Palestinians hold the world record of a people that has been offered a state and have turned it down, most often with violence. They turn it down not because of the borders. They turn it down not because of settlements. They don't turn it down even because of Jerusalem. They turn it down for one reason every single time. And that is that the price that they have to pay for a Palestinian state is recognizing a Jewish state.
The Israeli newspaper Haaretz first reported on the proposal. The Prime Minister's office declined to comment on the story. Some believe the release of the information may be time to embarrass Netanyahu, as relations with the U.S. are warming. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Chris. Pat, as Chris just said, the relations are certainly warming.
Well, they're warming between the United States, but they're not warming the Palestinians. The Palestinians, you know, Yasser Arafat, he started something called the Intifada, which means shaking, and he just wanted to stir up trouble and make war. He got his money, by the way, from the other Arab nations as long as there was trouble going on in Israel. When the trouble stopped, the money stopped. So Arafat wanted the, quote, Intifada, and he was offered a tremendous peace deal, and he turned it down. So what's the problem? They've got all these Palestinians and they reproduce probably more rapidly than the Jewish people do. So before long, there are more Palestinians than Jews. So you put them into one nation under the Jewish control, and now the Jews are in a nation that has more people, more Arabs than there are Jews. And if they have a democracy and they start to vote, then they'll vote control. So they won't allow them to vote. So that means they'd be sitting on top of a powder keg. They'd be controlling them. One solution would be to give them back to Jordan where they used to be as citizens. But they've got a real problem in terms of demography. And this two states not going to work. And they certainly can't, if the Palestinians don't want it, and their rhetoric is so inflammatory about Jews. I mean, they teach the kids hateful things about Jews, and there's almost no possibility of peace. So what are they going to do? I mean, it's really a difficult thing, and you know, the Jews don't want to be part of a minority country, and they certainly don't want to be in charge of a military dictatorship that suppresses the majority. I mean, it's really tough. So only the Lord knows the answer, but the one answer is not to give up Jerusalem and to give up all that Judea and Samaria. And there's a lot of land that's that's under the control of the Arab nations. They could set up a big territory for Palestinians if they wanted to do it. And there might have to be a mass migration, but it's going to be a difficult issue, and we need to understand what they're dealing with. Well, you remember there was a case called Roe versus Wade, and we learned that mostly that was a put-up case by the ACLU. Well, Norma McCovey, who was better known as the Jane Roe in the now famous Roe versus Wade decision that legalized abortion, has just died at age 69. Now, she was 22 years old and pregnant when the case went to the Supreme Court. And later, Norma McCovey said, "I deeply regret my role in that suit. I've become a Christian, and I am pro-life." In an interview with CBN News a few years ago, McCovey explained her changed views and her newfound purpose within the abortion industry.
Lord's called me to go out and speak to women, hoping that if there's just that one sitting in that audience on that particular night, that maybe I can change her mind.
Well, McCovey spent the rest of her years as a pro-life activist, encouraged others to fight for life. And she said her conversion to Christianity convinced her that homosexuality was wrong and caused her to leave her same-sex partner. Wow. Well, she leaves behind 3 children, but isn't that amazing? She was a poster child, and Judge Blackmun wrote the decision. It was later called Blackmun's abortion because it had no foundation whatsoever in constitutional law. It was a made-up case based on the whole idea of privacy that came out of a Connecticut case, and it was a put-together deal. With what amounted to a phony plaintiff. I mean, it was just, you know, but they got away with it. And then they say, well, quote, Roe versus Wade is the settled law of the land. Well, one of these days somebody's going to overturn that because it needs to go to the states. The state needs to vote on what they're going to do instead of having it imposed on them by a court. John, what's next?
Pat, turning to health news, no more junk food at government meetings and tourist establishments in the tiny island nation of Vanuatu. That's because the government is banning them and replacing them with local food like lobsters, coconuts, and lime juice. The chairman of the Torba Tourism Council tells the New York Times this is an effort to promote local agriculture and a response to the increase in diabetes and other diseases in Vanuatu's capital. Some Pacific Island nations now have rates of diabetes between 2 and 4 times higher than that of the United States. Experts tell the Times the health crisis mainly has been driven by a long-term shift from traditional diets to ones high in sugar, refined starch, and processed foods. Pat, it sounds like they're finally listening to you.
The Vanuatu, that's the place to start a bank. If you want your own bank, do it in Vanuatu. It's a wonderful location to organize a bank. But in the meantime, those people have found the answer. We are being made a nation of ill people, diabetes, heart disease, and all the rest because of sugar and processed food, a lot of flour, white flour, and processed foods. And the people in Vanuatu said, we're going to ban all that. God bless them. Stay with it and don't be intimidated by the food industry. Wendy, they've got it right.
I've never heard of Vanuatu.
You haven't?
I've been everywhere.
Oh, stop it. Vanuatu is the paradise for banking. You haven't got your own bank yet?
Not yet.
Well, darling,
is it in the Caribbean? Is it?
No, it's in the Pacific.
It's in the Pacific.
Yeah, it's a nice island in the Pacific where you can go and start a bank. It's wonderful.
When I'm in the islands, I never eat junk food because they have so much great fresh fruit,
well,
all the tropical
but
fruits.
You see,
and
we've imposed on them. They've started to eat all these Twinkies and all the whatever we sell around here that we eat. They've got all that sugar, and those people in Vanuatu are getting diabetes, and they're dying, and they say we've got to stop it.
But at least they have good banks.
They have, well, I don't know how good they are, but they're easy to start. How about that?